Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise wholeheartedly support the South Australian Productivity Commission Bill 2018 and congratulate Premier Stephen Marshall for introducing this bill. It's wonderful to see a Premier who's committed to an efficient, productive state. I see this as an essential piece of legislation offering exciting potential to deliver big-picture change for this state, and the bill's intent is to establish a statutory independent body not directed in its functions by government and with the prime mission to improve the productivity and efficiency of the South Australian economy. This bill and its intent I see as being at the core of all that this side is working toward: to lift growth, improve services, lift competitiveness for business by removing unnecessary red tape and reducing costs of regulation, to generate and create new industry and to improve transparency and accountability for every single tax dollar collected and spent. And, a particular favourite of mine, a clear objective of the new South Australian Productivity Commission will be to promote regional development as the recognised potential significant driver it is for future economic growth for our state. For all these reasons, this important bill was scheduled pre-election to be introduced in our first 100 days in office, and I am very pleased that it has been recognised as urgent in this way. And to have an opportunity to stand today in support of this bill and its intent is very pleasing. I value this bill for all the reasons mentioned, but also because of the exciting potential a proactive productivity commission can offer this state. The opportunity for research and policy development, creative thinking for innovative solutions, and the opportunity to use the best brains across multiple sectors and industries we have here in this state. It is exciting to consider such a platform could be the catalyst for a state growth revival, which can only bring with it fresh, new public confidence in our state's leadership and governance to ultimately raise the standards of living for all South Australians. The intent of this bill, too, epitomises the core of Liberal Party values, of individual freedoms and free enterprise, virtues also at the heart of my maiden speech in this place when I talked about the reasons I decided to stand for election as the member for Narungga and why I believe the electorate has so much untapped potential and is worth standing up for. I stood for election to build and progress and instigate great change for the people who live within my electorate, to develop policy and regulation to encourage new industry, particularly in the agriculture and primary production industries in rural areas. And I'm a proud advocate for any policy development which can stop the drain of young people from regional areas to Adelaide, and even worse, then from Adelaide to interstate. And I believe the establishment of an independent commission such as the South Australian Productivity Commission can offer much to address adverse trends such as this. It is essential young people who we have so well educated stay in South Australia to live and realise their dreams and aspirations, to work, build families, create and support local businesses and services, to be proud South Australians. For this drain to be stopped, there must be jobs growth, new industries created, new businesses encouraged, attractive standards of living created. More and more, we realise that government cannot entirely be relied on for job creation and that it's time to empower the private sector to fill voids. And this bill well matches this core need. The bill before us to establish a state-based productivity commission is a clear-cut one. It establishes a body with clear directions, clear functions, clear leadership and chain of command, and a clear mandatory public reporting requirements. Objectives of the Commission, as outlined in this bill, include to increase employment, to improve quality and efficiency of services delivered or funded by government, to improve the competitiveness of private sector investment, to reduce the cost of regulation, to facilitate structural changes within our economy, to promote regional development and development occurring in an ecologically sustainable way, to produce its own body of research relating to new investigations, not replicating any existing bodies of work and without interference from government. I draw members' attention to the explanation of clauses in the bill. Part 2, point 6, independence. Except as provided under this or any other Act, the Commission is not subject to ministerial direction in the performance of its functions. All in this place would be aware our nation has had a productivity commission at a federal level since 1998, which has been recorded as having shaped major economic, social and environmental reforms since the 1970s. These include tariff reductions and the deregulation of the financial system, and more recently as having played an important role in the establishment of the National Disability and Insurance Scheme. Interestingly, in an article written by Professor Judith Sloan in 2011, who was a commissioner of the Australia's Productivity Commission from 1998 to 2010, it is declared the sheer independence of the organisation and the inability of politicians to control outcomes once a reference has been set are both secrets to its unbridled success. And the reason, over the years, numerous politicians and bureaucrats from a number of countries have consulted about setting up similar organisations within their own countries, only to not ever take any action on it, apart from New Zealand notably. More on them later. Professor Judith Sloan concludes in her 2011 paper entitled "How Useful is the Productivity Commission?" that of Australia's National Productivity Commission, while this may seem scary and unconstrained, the independence and commitment to open and transparent processes underscore the Commission's strength as a force for good in policy making. She goes on to assert that the Commission has made major contributions to the public policy debate in Australia and has dealt with core economic issues and important social policy topics. It has produced innovative work on the environment. Its regular reporting of the provision of government services across the state and territories continues to provide useful information. The data it produces in relation to Indigenous disadvantage add value to policy making in that area. Working from the premise that regulation should be light-handed, effective and efficient, the Commission has recommended many changes along these lines in its reports. As an independent advisory body, Professor Sloan goes on to say, and spared the requirement of servicing any government minister on a routine basis, the Commission has made substantial contributions to the quality of policy outcomes. Much has also been written about the success of New Zealand's Productivity Commission, set up as an independent Crown entity in April 2011, with its principal purpose, as quoted under the New Zealand Productivity Commission Act 2010, to provide advice to the government on improving productivity in a way that is directed to supporting the overall well-being of New Zealanders, having regard to a wide range of communities of interest and population groups in the New Zealand society. Its definition of productivity is also interesting, and I quote from the New Zealand Productivity Commission website, with its mantra of productivity growth for maximum well-being. It states, productivity is about how well people combine resources to produce goods and services. For countries, it is about creating more available resources, such as raw materials, labour, skills, capital equipment, land, intellectual property, managerial capability and financial capital. With the right choices, higher production, higher value and higher incomes. With the right choices, higher production, higher value and higher incomes can be achieved for every hour worked. The next question answered in the report is, why does productivity matter? I quote, generally speaking, the higher the productivity of a country, the higher the living standards that it can afford and the more options it has to choose to improve well-being. Well-being can be increased by things like quality healthcare and education, excellent roads and infrastructure, safer communities, stronger support for people who need it and improved environmental standards. High productivity societies are characterised by smart choices about saving and investment versus current consumption, dynamic and competitive markets, openness to trade and international correctedness, high awareness of external influences, rapid uptake and smart applications of new technology, products and processes, and increasing demand for highly skilled and creative people. These are successful societies that attract and retain people, ideas and capital, all things we need here in South Australia desperately. The need to improve productivity was particularly important in New Zealanders back in 2010 when it slipped from the top 10 to number 21 in the list of wealthiest countries in the OECD. It was recognised that any lag in relative productivity matters a lot over time, and that a tide of loss of New Zealanders in the multiple hundreds of thousands choosing to live abroad for higher living standards and options such as wider employment choices, higher incomes and better quality social services had to be stemmed. To sustain and hopefully improve New Zealand's wellbeing, our incomes need to grow, stated a recent New Zealand Productivity Commission report. With New Zealanders already amongst the hardest working people in the OECD in terms of hours worked, improving productivity is the most likely way of achieving higher incomes. Even small increases in productivity growth, if sustained, can have a big impact on income and wellbeing. The same article also states there is no simple formula for lifting productivity, but it does offer the following. A country's productivity performance is also influenced by factors that governments cannot do much about, such as size, natural resource endowment and distance from global markets. Even then, successful countries develop policies and strategies to mitigate or accommodate such factors. More generally, there is no room for complacency. Ongoing improvement of the broad framework that shapes and incentivises productivity is essential. Mr Deputy Speaker, that is precisely what the Productivity Commission of South Australia will do. Closer to home, Victoria has had a state-based productivity commission for about 20 years. Queensland established theirs next, and as recently as February this year, New South Wales announced its establishment of a productivity commission with the direct aim to, and I quote, come up with ways to improve housing affordability, lower living costs and make it easier to move to New South Wales and do business in the state. In announcing the New South Wales Commission, Treasurer Dominic Perrottet said the new commission would help drive the next frontier in reform for New South Wales, drive a micro-reform agenda and give us huge momentum to change New South Wales for the better. How successful that has been, Mr Deputy Speaker. Media of the day referenced our Federal Productivity Commission as having recently estimated that reducing regulatory compliance costs by about 20% could boost New South Wales gross state product by $6 billion a year in the long run. Former New South Wales Auditor General Peter Acterstrat, well remembered for having found a $1 billion error in the New South Wales accounts in 2012, prompting him to warn that the state was a billion-dollar business, not a school tuck shop, was named the first head of the New South Wales Commission and took up his post only about 3 weeks ago, on 21st May. He said, among the Commission's first tasks will be examining the build-to-rent sector, which encourages institutions to construct homes that are destined for rental rather than sale, exploring common expiry dates for multiple vehicles, reviewing government procurement practices, and investigating mutual recognition of licences and certificates with other jurisdictions. The New South Wales Treasurer was quoted as saying Mr Acterstrat would have a mandate to bust red tape and make New South Wales the easiest place to do business, and that if we are going to keep lifting living standards, tackling productivity is non-negotiable. Mr Deputy Speaker, the situation is no different here in South Australia. Tackling productivity here is non-negotiable here either. This is not an abdication of decision-making by this new government, Mr Deputy Speaker, rather an effort to arm ourselves with sufficient evidence to make an informed decision. Where the former government was more interested in pork barrelling certain seats, this government will ensure that each project or undertaking is given proper consideration of its merit with the best possible information. Indeed, as I have already highlighted throughout my speech, there are other comparable jurisdictions who utilise the immense advantage that having a productivity commission can provide. That it is working so well in other jurisdictions should be evidence enough for those in this place and the other to support the speedy movement of this legislation through this parliament. One wonders about the benefits of having a productivity commission in the past and going forward into the future. I wonder about the benefits toward regional communities that the Productivity Commission will support in its pursuit of regional development, and a number of decisions that it may not have supported or would have been found lacking if it were available in the past. I suspect that the Productivity Commission would have never supported the lowering of speed limits on regional roads in lieu of investing in the maintenance of those roads. Without the electoral imperatives, as it was titled by a former Premier, to invest in regional roads, the previous government made a conscious decision to decrease productivity. Consider how much longer it took truck drivers delivering the product of primary producers to port on poorer quality roads at lower speed limits. It would amount to a matter of days by the end of the harvest and be a severe impost on primary producers in regional areas. Similarly, I suspect going forward into the future, the Productivity Commission would provide emphatic support for the Liberal Party plan to lift the payroll tax threshold here in South Australia. There is no way that a tax on jobs can be considered productive or efficient in any way, and I look forward to supporting the passage of that bill through this House as well. All policies developed by the Liberal Party are about increasing productivity for all sectors of South Australia in ensuring government becomes streamlined and efficient, providing opportunity to the private sector to thrive by removing unnecessary regulation and rule, and importantly, providing essential infrastructure for all regions of this state to fulfil the tasks that keeps the state functioning. Establishing the South Australian Productivity Commission will aid this government in obtaining information to support that pursuit. With that, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll commend to the House this important motion to establish a South Australian Productivity Commission as soon as practically possible. I look forward to the expeditious process of this bill through the House and encourage all in this place to offer similar support for the good of our state going forward.
Member for Colton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I also rise today to support the South Australian Productivity Commission Bill of 2018. The introduction of this bill, as you know, delivers on one of this government's key election commitments to establish a state-based productivity commission